Ashdod, in Ashkelon as well. And of course, we know yesterday in Jerusalem, a threat was made from the Islamic Jihad to target Tel Aviv. At the top of the hour, this has just happened. And right now, people are making their way to safety, trying to get to their shelters so that they can take their members of their families and make sure that they are safe. Michael Herzog, Arsen Ostrovsky, still with me in studio. Talk to me about what's going on right now, Michael.
So, as they threaten, as was expected, they are firing at Tel Aviv, and I think Israel will probably go and answer with its own escalatory steps. So this is going to take, I imagine, a few days, and we just have to be patient. But what is important is how this round ends, and it has to end with the Hamas conclusion that this was not worth their while. I think Israel has some more tools in its toolbox. We haven't targeted the senior leadership of Hamas or Jihad Islami, only mid-level. We just started destroying some high-rising buildings in Gaza. I think they stand a lot to lose.
We are hearing noises up ahead, some level of explosion. It is very likely that this is the Iron Dome missile defense system. If you've never heard of it, this is a missile defense system made by Israel here that happens to detect an incoming projectile or a rocket, detects where it is going to land, and if it is going to land near a residential area, is able to intercept it. The Iron Dome missile defense system is able to save thousands and thousands of lives. And yes, Michael, we can hear up above us those explosions. Are we too far away to know exactly what is going on?
That's correct, but I think the sound that we hear are probably Iron Dome rockets being fired at the incoming rockets in order to intercept them. And we just have to wait and see how this develops.
If you are watching right now and you're just joining us, this is breaking news. Sirens are sounding in the Israeli city of Tel Aviv. And if you're wondering why the studio looks slightly different, our entire control team has gone down to shelter, as has our support team here in the newsroom. That is because the sirens give people in the city just a few moments to get to shelters, and that for the most part has happened here in this newsroom at this channel at I-24 News in Jaffa and Tel Aviv. But choosing to stay here in studio right now, retired Brigadier General Michael Herzog, the former Chief of Staff and Senior Military Aide to 4 Israeli defense ministers and international fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy, and Arsen Ostrovsky, the CEO of the International Legal Forum. Arsen, how are you feeling right now?
How am I feeling? Messaging my wife right now. How am I feeling? I have 2 small children, an infant and a 4-year-old. I'm away from them.
I'm going to stop you right now. I'm sure your wife is watching, as are all family members, because we are hearing more sirens signaling that some form of projectile and or rocket is being sent from the Gaza Strip towards the city of Tel Aviv. This is breaking news here in Israel. Sirens sounding in the coastal city of Tel Aviv. That means thousands of people, as we speak, are making their way to safety. That means they are, like Arsen says, calling their relatives, their spouses, their children, and their loved ones to say, make sure you get to safety and you do it quickly. Arsen, let you continue. You were saying.
I feel a sense of chill through my body that, I think as anyone with a family does when you're away from your loved ones, your partners, your kids. I don't know what's happening. I have no control. It's a feeling of powerlessness. I want to be there now. I know I can't be. I can only hope and pray that they, like everyone else in Tel Aviv and across Israel, are in safety right now.
So perhaps you can give us some level of insight, because Arsen is saying he has no idea what is going on, but we are from the studio here in Jaffa and Tel Aviv hearing some form of explosion above us. We are not equipped to be able to tell you what that is. It is very likely, though, the Iron Dome missile defense system, but retired Brigadier General Michael Herzog will have a better idea.
So the sounds that we hear probably Iron Dome trying to intercept incoming rockets, but we hear a lot of them. And that may, it may indicate that Hamas and Jihad Islami have launched numerous rockets at Tel Aviv. Their tactic is to launch at a very short time span a lot of rockets so as to overwhelm our defenses. And I think what we're hearing are many interceptors being flown against them. Usually it's more than 1-to-1. Usually use even 2-to-1 in order to ensure interception, and that's probably what we're hearing. And I hope that all of them will be intercepted.
We can hear yet another explosion as we are speaking here from our studios in Jaffa, Tel Aviv. These are very likely, as we've been discussing here in studio, the sound of an interception. The Iron Dome missile defense system able to detect incoming projectiles or rockets that have been sent through from Gaza. And just for some context, just around half an hour ago, we were broadcasting here that the Islamic Jihad had said that at 9 o'clock Israel time, they would be targeting Tel Aviv. It is now coming up for 5 minutes to 9, and this is exactly what is transpiring here out of the city of Tel Aviv. Michael, give us an idea. You've been, as we discussed earlier, in an assessment environment for security. You've been advising people, leaders, in a situation like this. How much of a game changer is it when the target becomes Tel Aviv?
Well, you know, from an Israeli standpoint, it doesn't matter if they fire at Tel Aviv or at Sderot, but symbolically, there is something symbolic about it.
And on our screens right now, we are seeing the Tel Aviv skyline. You are watching live images of Tel Aviv right now. Thousands of residents scurrying to shelters. You are watching a live image on your screen. We have heard sirens in the last few moments, warning of a possible incoming projectile and or a rocket making its way towards Tel Aviv. We are hearing explosions above us. It is very likely that those explosions are the Iron Dome missile defense system. Michael, do continue about how much of a game changer Tel Aviv is in the scenario.
It's something symbolic, that you target Israeli major population centers, the biggest city, Tel Aviv, having targeted Israel's capital city, Jerusalem, which also is a game changer.
I'm going to stop you right now because we can see on our screens live images. It appears that a building in Tel Aviv has been hit. This information coming through right now. We are watching live images on our screen. Incoming rocket alerts heard in Tel Aviv. It appears that a building in Tel Aviv has been hit. We are bringing you a closer image coming out. Live images right now from Tel Aviv. Thousands of people in this city making their way to shelters, contacting their loved ones, their spouses, their children, their community members to make sure that they are all getting to safety right now. Michael.
So in the perception of Hamas paralyzing the life in the center of Israel, in Tel Aviv, the biggest city, or in Jerusalem, is symbolically important, and for them it's a game changer. But I think what it means for Israel is that we will have to further exacerbate the means that we are taking against them, because I assume that decision makers right now are already thinking on how this is going to end, how exactly we want this to end, and if in order for the situation to improve, it has to probably go through worst phases, and we'll have to deal with that. I think right now the IDF is probably carrying another wave of attacks, escalating situation in Gaza. I assume we'll see more targeting of high-rising buildings in Gaza, and I do not rule out that if this continues, that the IDF will target senior leadership figures in Hamas, Jihad Islami, and other groups in Gaza.
You are watching live images on your screen right now. This is Tel Aviv. Breaking news, sirens sounding in just the last while. signaling that an incoming rocket or projectile is making its way from Gaza towards the city of Tel Aviv. That happening just a short while after the Islamic Jihad terror group vowed to target Tel Aviv at the top of the hour. That's around 2 minutes from now. Our entire control room and most of our newsroom here at I-24 News have made their way to the shelters here in our premises, as have most of people in Tel Aviv, getting to safety and no doubt trying to contact their loved ones to make sure that everybody is doing the same. With me still in studio, retired Brigadier General Michael Herzog and Arsen Ostrovsky. And Arsen, I understand a very nerve-wracking time right now for so many people. We have heard reports in the last 24 hours, even amongst communities that are used to these sirens, where people have panic attacks, where they're rushing, people falling as they try to get quickly to safety. Not everyone can do that calmly always, and particularly for children. This is a terrifying time.
It's a petrifying time. Children in the south have post-traumatic stress disorder for years. Grown-ups, adults struggle to cope with
I'm going to stop you right now because we have more breaking news coming through right now. Reports that a building has been hit in the city of Holon. You are looking at live images on your screen right now. This is breaking news here on I-24 News. Reports that a building in the city of Holon near Tel Aviv has been hit. It is not clear, obviously, at this point, the extent of the damage. These are rockets that we are hearing are coming over Tel Aviv, and confirmation right now we are hearing that in Ashkelon as well. It seems a barrage is coming over from the Gaza Strip right now. We are hearing sirens in Tel Aviv, in Ashkelon and in Holon, and hearing that a building has been hit in the city of Holon. There is also a barrage of rockets coming through to the southern city of Ashkelon, which has already been targeted several times in the last 24 hours. This is breaking news here on I-24 News. If you're just joining us now, sirens sounding within the last half an hour in the city of Tel Aviv. Thousands of residents making their way to safety, trying to get to shelters, usually underneath a building. In some cases, certain homes do have a secure room for this exact purpose. You can see on your screen right now those lights in the air indicating the Iron Dome missile defense system is intercepting incoming projectiles and rockets that are being sent from the Gaza Strip towards Israel, reaching as far as Tel Aviv, as Holon, and we are hearing booms above us right now, and that is the sound of the interception. That means the Iron Dome missile defense system has detected an incoming projectile. It is able to assess if it is likely to hit a residential area and can then intercept that incoming rocket. This Iron Dome missile defense system saves thousands of lives every time there is a barrage of rockets coming into Israeli territory. You're looking at live images on your screen right now, just to give you an idea of the context of what is transpiring right now in I-24 News. Most of our control room and most of our newsroom have left the building to go down to our shelters to make sure that they are safe from these incoming projectiles and rockets. A barrage now heading for the southern city of Ashkelon, also hearing that a very short while ago that Holon was also targeted and that a building has been hit. Brigadier General, retired Brigadier General Michael Herzog, still with me in studio, as in Arsen Ostrovsky. Take us back to 2014, Michael. What was it like? What does it feel like for a country to be waiting to hear when the next siren is going to go off and they're going to have to race with their loved ones to shelter?
Well, 2014 was a very long round. was nearly 2 months. And you can imagine the psychological toll and the tension and the stress that the whole country felt going through this endeavor for nearly 2 months without seeing the end of it. And I think one of the conclusions from Protective Edge in 2014 was that we cannot let such a round drag for so long. We have to shorten it, and the way to shorten it is just to escalate to a point where Hamas says it's enough is enough. And this is probably what we're going to see. We just saw the IDF targeting one high-rising building in Gaza. This is what ended 2014 when we started destroying high-rising buildings in Gaza and targeting their leadership. And we're probably going to see more of that.
I want to also speak to you about this retaliatory operation that Israel has been conducting since the first barrage happened last night, because it was so precise. Already we know that senior officials from Hamas and Islamic Jihad had been killed in the last 24 hours. If Israel is able to respond so quickly and so swiftly and so accurately when it needs to, what does it do in a situation like this? What's on the cards?
Well, first of all, intelligence is gathered over time, and the IDF prepares a bank of targets, and so when this erupts, they already have a bank of targets.
And news just in, and it is that one person has been seriously injured in the latest barrage of rockets. It is not clear at this moment where that particular injury has taken place, but confirmation right now that one person has been injured just moments ago. Here in Israel, we are aware of sirens sounding in Tel Aviv, in Holon, and in the southern city of Ashkelon. Michael.
So, as I said, first the IDF prepares over time a bank of targets, and there are also targets of opportunity that the IDF pursues. But on top of that, what the IDF does when Hamas fires and this round of violence erupts, the IDF takes the opportunity in order to destroy as much as possible military assets belonging to Hamas, Jihad Islami, and other militant groups, including command and control centers, military positions, including mid-level commanders, including storage facilities for weapons or manufacturing facilities for weapons, attack tunnels, and the likes. And this is exactly what the IDF has been doing for the last 24 hours, denying them as many assets as possible.
Well, Hamas, in breaking news, is now claiming just seconds ago that 130 rockets have been fired from Gaza towards Tel Aviv. I'm going to say that again. This is breaking news. The Hamas terror group saying just a short while ago it has sent 130 rockets towards Tel Aviv. Michael, break that down for us. Talk to us about that.
That is possible. I don't know if it's exactly 130, but as I explained earlier, their tactics is to fire over a very short time span a huge number of rockets so as to overwhelm our defenses. And that's what they've been trying to do. If only one of them fell in Holon, it means a high rate of success in interception, but we don't know the exact number. Yes, we're here.
And we also need to clarify that this is the claim being made from Hamas. This is no way being confirmed at this point by anybody on the ground in Israel. But we are reiterating, Hamas is saying 130 rockets have been fired from Gaza towards Tel Aviv. Also, we are hearing that a bus has been hit in the city of Holon. I need to reiterate here, there are no injuries, but we are hearing just moments ago that a bus has been hit in the city of Holon. Arsen, we've been talking about the human factor here, the fear, the worrying about one's loved ones. I can see you're anxious. It's understandable. Are you able to talk to us about your feelings right now as we are hearing how various cities are being targeted by Hamas as they said they would? How are you feeling?
How am I feeling? Feeling a sense of helplessness, I think, as I said before, being away from your loved ones, not knowing where they are, getting messages right now from my wife and family that they're in bomb shelter, and that when you're away from them, it's it's a sense of numbingness. But we're not the only ones going through this. Families across the country are going through this. And you have to ask yourself, enough is enough. At what point does this madness end? Israel will do whatever Israel requires to do in order to end this. I have no doubt about that whatsoever. Where is the international community right now? They waste not a single breath to condemn us, but where is their outrage when over 700 rockets are fired at us, fired at civilians, sending thousands of families to shelter? Every single voice that does not call out unequivocally the Palestinian, the Hamas, Islamic Jihad terror, and condemns Israel, they are guilty for every single rocket that is fired against us. But we will do whatever necessary to defend every one of our citizens.
Michael, your thoughts on what's being discussed right now by security bosses in Israel?
So I think the discussion now is probably on how to respond to this new barrage of firing on Tel Aviv and central Israel. And again, thinking 24, 48, 72 hours ahead on how to end this. But I think when we end this, we in Israel have to think very seriously on our strategy vis-a-vis Gaza. It may be that the conclusion will be that we ultimately have no choice.
I'm going to stop you there. We have breaking news. Another barrage of rockets is heading towards Tel Aviv. This is breaking news out of Gaza. Another barrage of rockets has been sent towards Tel Aviv, as was promised by Islamic Jihad around half an hour ago, perhaps 40 minutes now, since the promise was made that at the top of the hour, 9 o'clock Israel time, that Tel Aviv would be targeted. Since then, Hamas is claiming that 130 rockets have been sent towards Tel Aviv. Again, I will reiterate that this is a claim by the Hamas terror group, that 130 rockets have been sent towards Tel Aviv. Now, one person has been seriously injured. Again, we can't clarify at this point exactly where that person is, but we do know that a bus was hit in Holon. There were no injuries there. It appears a building was damaged in Holon. And we also know that a barrage of rockets made its way towards Ashkelon in southern Israel, that's close to the Israel-Gaza border, a city that has been targeted several times throughout this day. With me in studio, retired Brigadier General Michael Herzog, choosing to stay in studio as well, Arsen Ostrowski, and I'm clarifying exactly that because for the most part, most of the people at this channel, I-24 News, have made their way to the shelters. As I'm speaking to you right now, we can hear an explosion overhead. We obviously are not able to confirm exactly what that noise is. You are looking at live images on your screen right now. It appears that that explosion we are hearing would be the Iron Dome missile defense system, which is able to detect an incoming projectile and is able to intercept it. Michael.
So what I was saying, maybe the conclusion will be that Israel has no choice but to go for a major military operation against Hamas and other militant groups in Gaza, so as not to have a repetition of violent eruption every now and then. But Israel cannot be dragged into such a confrontation. Israel has to plan it, Israel has to prepare it, to set the ground for it, to set the exact strategic goals of such an operation and how we want to end it, and then do it.
So what is the end game? You've made reference to that a couple of times already. Where does it end in a situation like this? 130 rockets, according to Hamas, making its way towards Tel Aviv. We are hearing more and more alerts coming through from various cities in the country right now, including Holon and Ashkelon in the south. Where does it end for Israel?
I think the aim should be for Hamas to be hit so hard that it will be in their own interest to go for a long-term ceasefire. But I think Israel has to employ also political tools here, maybe involve some other actors who've not been active in this, perhaps some other Arab actors, not only Qatar or Egypt. And the Egyptians have been playing a very important role, but it's not enough. And perhaps other international actors to play a role here, so that their interest will be in maintaining a long-term ceasefire we have to restore deterrence, long-term deterrence. Right now, deterrence fails, as we can see, as we can witness.
I want to bring you in here, Arsen, because we were talking just a short while ago before this barrage of rockets about the lack of outrage from the international community. You, of course, have been monitoring that kind of response in the last 24 hours. Do you think now, when you're seeing these reports out of Tel Aviv, when you know that people are phoning their loved ones from around the world to check in that they are okay, that there is more of a profile on an attack as such on Tel Aviv than there might be elsewhere, rightly or wrongly so? Does it make a difference to the response we are likely to get from the international arena?
As far as I'm concerned, Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, Ashkelon, Sderot, it's all Israel. A rocket anywhere in Israel is a rocket on the Israeli people. I don't care where it is. No one in Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, or anywhere across the country should suffer even one rocket. So far as the international community is concerned, I think their silence more or less speaks volumes. I keep hearing these, calls for calm and restraint. Are you kidding me? If even one rocket fell in the United States, if one rocket fell in Moscow, London, Berlin, or Rome, do you think they would show restraint, calm, when they have over 1 million people in shelters, people dying, rockets falling on their children? Are you kidding me? Enough of this restraint. Right now, the international community has to unequivocally show their solidarity with Israel and call out Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and the Palestinian Authority, mind you, not only for their silence to condemn this, but for their inflaming of this situation and for the firing of rockets, which is a double war crime. They hide behind Palestinian civilians while they fire at Israeli civilians. Enough. Enough is enough.
And breaking news just in here, we are getting confirmation that 3 people have been wounded in the city of Holon. One of them is a young girl. Confirmation coming through just a short while ago that 3 people have been wounded in the city of Holon. One of those people is a young girl. We know that a bus was hit in that city, and it appears that a building was also hit. We are still waiting for confirmation on that one serious injury, exactly where that has taken place. We do know that within the last 45 minutes or so, sirens have sounded in the city of Ashkelon, in the south of Israel, in the city of Tel Aviv, where we are broadcasting from live right now, and in the city of Holon, which is near Tel Aviv. If you are just joining us, this is breaking news. The Islamic Jihad terror group vowed to target the city of Tel Aviv at 9 o'clock Israel time. Before that deadline hit, sirens sounded and rocket fire, projectiles of some sort, were sent from the Gaza Strip towards the city of Tel Aviv. Sirens sounding, sparking a dash for cover for thousands of citizens, thousands of people living in the city of Tel Aviv, as well as in Holon, as well as in Ashkelon, trying to get to shelters so that they would not be hurt. Now, the Iron Dome missile defense system, if you look on your screen right now, you can see one of those projectiles coming towards Tel Aviv. There are 2 on your screen right now. We have been hearing large explosions above. That is an Iron Dome interception we are looking on our screen right now. An Iron Dome missile defense system is able to detect what we are looking at our screens. It can detect some form of projectile coming through towards a residential area, and it can detect where it is going to land and is able to intercept that incoming projectile. This defense system saves thousands of lives. Retired Brigadier General Michael Herzog is with me in studio, as is Arsen Ostrovsky. They are both, to clarify, choosing and agreeing to stay in studio. Most of the newsroom here at the Channel I-24 News, broadcasting live from the port of Jaffa and Tel Aviv, has gone to shelter. They are waiting for the green light, so to speak, to be able to come back into the newsroom. Michael, talk to us about 130 rockets coming towards Tel Aviv, according to Hamas, and more we are watching on our screen being intercepted right now.
So this is a real challenge to intercept if you have so many rockets coming at a certain defined area. And as I explained, the idea is to overwhelm Israeli interception capabilities. Fortunate for us, we have a very capable radar that can discriminate between incoming projectiles and tell you if they are going to hit empty area or the sea or a civilian populated area, and then make the decision on the spot whether or not to fire an interceptor. So this saves us a lot of interceptors, and we can focus on those who really threaten civilian populated areas. And again, unfortunately, this is not foolproof, this is not 100%, and we have taken into consideration that there may be some injuries here.
In recent days, we heard with the escalation and the building of tensions that various battalions and troops were being called in. We are looking at live images on our screen right now. These are images taken from Holon, where we know now that 3 Israelis were wounded in the latest barrage, including a young child. 3 Israelis wounded in the latest barrage in the city of Holon. We do know that a bus was hit. We also know that another person has been seriously injured, although at this point there is no confirmation exactly where that person was hit. But within the last hour, sirens sounding in the cities of Tel Aviv, Holon and Ashkelon, thousands of people racing to get to shelters. They are likely still waiting in those shelters for some kind of acknowledgement from authorities that it is safe to come out from those shelters. That certainly is not happening right now. We've been watching on our screens what looks like interceptions from the Iron Dome missile defense system. Michael, talk to us about what we've been seeing.
So what we've been seeing is that Hamas is gradually escalating its own operations against Israel. I mean, they started very high with 7 rockets aimed at Jerusalem as part of this equation tying Gaza and Jerusalem. Then they focused their efforts on the area surrounding Gaza. And then they started expanding to Ashkelon and now to Tel Aviv. And they could go beyond Tel Aviv if they choose to. But I think for them, the culmination is firing at the center of Israel at Tel Aviv.
I'm going to stop you right now because we are looking at images on your screen. They were taken earlier this evening. These are not live images. They were taken earlier this evening. It gives you an idea, though, if you're watching, what it looks like when a barrage of rockets heads towards Tel Aviv. And these rockets, for the most part, are being intercepted by the Iron Dome missile defense system. This is what it looks like. If people in Tel Aviv are looking up out of their windows, hopefully they are in shelters. Those who can get a glimpse at what is going on outside would be seeing what looks like lights in the sky. These are the interceptions that we've been talking about.
What we just saw is a very high rate of interception. Almost all of them were intercepted, if I could tell.
And again, reiterating that Hamas has been claiming that it has sent 130 rockets, as we saw on our screens there. As you said, Michael, that is a large interception on our screens. You can also see the number of projectiles that are coming through to Tel Aviv right now. These are live images, and another barrage of rockets making its way towards Tel Aviv. This is breaking news. If you're just joining us now, a barrage of rockets has been sent from the Gaza Strip towards the city of Tel Aviv. We know that 3 people have been injured in the city of Holon near Tel Aviv, including a young girl. We also know that 1 person has been seriously injured, although the exact location of that injury is not clear at this stage. We also are hearing from the Hamas terror group, and it's a claim made by the group, no confirmation on the Israeli side at this point, that 130 rockets have been sent, and this barrage coming just a short while after the Islamic Jihad vowed that at 9 o'clock at the top of the hour, around 22 minutes ago, that Tel Aviv would be targeted. What you're looking on at your screen right now are recorded images from earlier this evening. These are what the projectiles look like, and the interceptions coming from the Iron Dome missile defense system. Retired Brigadier General Michael Herzog. It's very vivid when you're looking at the pictures right now, how many lives are being saved by the Iron Dome. If these projectiles were landing, the situation would be vastly different.
Exactly. And when you look at the screen, it looks like a computer game, but it's not a computer game. This is about real lives. This is about real lives for our families.
And talk to us, Arsen, about when we talk the real lives, there's anger, there's frustration, and there's obviously fear right now. People are waiting for some kind of indication from authorities that the coast is clear, so to speak. It clearly is not right now. We have just seen a short while ago another barrage of rockets, and we were hearing that the interceptions were happening overhead. We could hear them live from our studio here in Jaffa and Tel Aviv. You've been making contact, Arsen, with family members and friends. What is everybody saying? What is the temperature on the ground outside of the studio right now?
First of all, it took me about half an hour to try and get a hold of my family. And I get a message from my mother-in-law saying that they're reading a storybook to my little girl, trying to keep this from her. Again, you know, we're just one family out of hundreds of thousands across the country that are, you know, have to shield our children and hold them and hug them and tell them, yes, it will be better, but not knowing that it will.
These are live images, visuals coming through. A correction, these are not live images. They are coming through from a short while ago. It is images from the city of Tel Aviv. We have confirmation that 3 Israelis wounded in the latest barrage, including a young child that was in the city of Holon near Tel Aviv. Those images you were looking at shows you the projectiles that are coming through from the Gaza Strip and the interceptions from the Iron Dome missile defense system. Now, to explain what this all looks like when it unfolds, when those sirens go off, it gives residents in Tel Aviv, Holon and Ashkelon, in terms of the last hour, just a few moments to get to shelters. If you are in an older building, an apartment block, you may need to get to the basement, the ground floor, which means if you are on the 17th floor, you need to get your relatives, young and old, down to safety at the bottom in the basement. Some of the more modern buildings and structures and homes in the country do have a set room which has been marked off as a safety area, and those people are able to get to safety a lot faster. But definitely a frightening experience for anybody who is hearing those sirens and knows that they don't have much time to get to safety. Michael, talk to us about the psyche for children. We were hearing from Arsen, trying to distract young people. It's very difficult to do that in this day and age of technology. They are very much in the loop about what is going on, and certainly Israeli children are all too aware of the dangers of rocket fire. We are looking at images from Holon. That is the city which was targeted a little bit earlier. We have confirmation 3 people wounded in that city. We know that a bus was hit. We also know one of the injured people was a child.
I think it's very typical in the Israeli experience that people like us are sitting in the studios and text messaging with our families to see where they are, whether they are in shelter. My kids are bigger than his. They are in their 20s, but I've just been text messaging with my daughter, who's 21 years old. She's away, she's on her way home, and I just gave her instructions that if she hears the siren, they have to stop the car, get out of the car, lie down on the ground, wait for this to, to go over, and then continue traveling. That's the experience, I would say, of almost every Israeli parent these days.
And we are getting confirmation just coming through right now. We said earlier that one person has been seriously injured. We were unable in the initial reports to confirm the area. It seems that that injury has happened in the city of Rishon LeZion. So that is one person seriously injured in the city of Rishon LeZion, 3 people wounded in the city of Holon, and one of those people is a young child. This follows a barrage of rockets being sent from the Gaza Strip. You're looking on your screen at visuals from a wedding. Yes, a time of celebration, and yet, look at above. You can see those lights are an indication that projectiles are being intercepted by the Iron Dome missile defense system. 4 Israelis in total wounded in the rocket attacks in Tel Aviv that are underway right now. Thousands of people in the city of Tel Aviv, Ashkelon and Holon are waiting in shelters as we speak, trying to contact their relatives, their friends and their community members to make sure that they too are safe. Confirmation at this hour, 4 people wounded in the rocket attacks on the Tel Aviv area, 1 in the city of Rishon LeZion seriously injured, and 3 wounded in the city of Holon.
I think the fact that we have reports about people being wounded in Rishon LeZion and Holon indicates that this big barrage of rockets was fired at the bigger metropolitan Tel Aviv. It's not only the city of Tel Aviv, but those satellite cities around it, like Holon and Rishon and others. So we are talking about a metropolitan area with around 1 million people, and all of them are in shelters. And I think that's a big deal.
That certainly is a massive amount of people who are waiting right now to get some kind of indication from authorities that it is okay to come out from those shelters. That certainly is not the case right now. Sirens have been sounding in the last hour in the city of Tel Aviv, in Holon, as well as in Ashkelon in the south. And as we've been discussing here in studio, the injuries include a serious injury in the city of Rishon LeZion, as well as 3 people wounded in Holon, one of them a young child. Talk to us about the communication that happens right now between various leaders. There is no time right now to get into the politics of what's going on in this country. There is a unifying time where security takes center stage, and that certainly is happening right now. Talk to us about the meetings underway as we speak.
So at times like this, I think these are unifying moments, and I think the focus is on security and what needs to be done security-wise. At times like this, politics is shoved aside. I certainly hope that this is the case. And people are focusing on what needs to be done security-wise. We are having usually consecutive meetings of the IDF leadership, Minister of Defense, Prime Minister, Cabinet, and all of this is taking place.
And we are looking at images on our screen right now. This is the city of Holon near Tel Aviv. This is where a bus was targeted. We can see the image of that burnt-out bus. We also can see that there has been extensive damage around the area close to the bus. We do not have clarity at this point exactly where the injuries of the people in Holon came from, but it certainly appears that extensive damage has happened right there to that vehicle. We can see emergency teams are on the screen, and these are definitely very concerning images to be watching right now for people who are joining us now. Rocket fire has come across from Gaza, sent from Hamas and the Islamic Jihad towards Israel within the last hour. 1 Israeli is seriously injured in the city of Rishon LeZion, 3 people moderately hurt in Holon, and we are looking at images on our screen right now out of the city there of Holon. if you're just joining us, what happens when those sirens goes off is that people have around a few minutes, in some cases just seconds, to get to some kind of shelter. Here we are reporting live, broadcasting to you live from the city of Jaffa, Tel Aviv. And for the most part, most of our control room and most of our newsroom is waiting in a shelter for the green light to come back into our premises. We are continuing broadcasting right now with me in studio. Agreeing and choosing to stay in studio is retired Brigadier General Michael Herzog and Arsen Ostrovsky. And when you look at those images, Arsen, as I know you have been contacting your family and looking at your phone and making contact with loved ones, what are you feeling when you look at the extent of the damage so far?
You know, you've said a number of times now that most of your production team is in shelter, as they should be. But Michael and myself and you have chosen to be here, have chosen to be on air. And I think that's important. We need to stress that we have chosen to be on air. And I think that's critical because we need to tell the truth. We need to speak. We need to show the world exactly what is happening, and that these terrorists will not dictate terms, that we will not cower to them, that we will continue to speaking out and to showing the world exactly what is happening.
Israeli media is reporting in just the last few moments that the person who was injured in the city of Rishon LeZion, seriously injured, has died. The Israeli media is confirming that a person who was seriously injured in the city of Rishon LeZion just a short while ago in rocket fire on the city of Tel Aviv has passed away. That means following this barrage of rockets that has come from the Gaza Strip towards Tel Aviv, one person has reportedly died, 3 people are wounded. One of the wounded people is a young girl. And still with me in studio is retired Brigadier General Michael Herzog. When somebody dies in a situation like this, how does that change the response right now? The country will be devastated. The country will be in mourning. What kind of reaction are you expecting?
Definitely, every fatality is a blow, but I think now is not the time for Israel to go for a ceasefire, because we have to continue this until Hamas wants a ceasefire and understand that it was a mistake on its behalf to escalate, to launch this round. So we just have to be patient and continue. And yes, we have to mourn all of these fatalities, and hopefully this is the last one in this round.
And this is coming, of course, in the latest barrage in the last hour. This is very sad breaking news here in Israel. Israeli media is reporting that the person who was injured in that rocket barrage in the city of Rishon LeZion has passed away. Of course, we also know that the death toll earlier in the day stood already at 2 from rocket fire in the city of Ashkelon. So overall, in the past 24 hours, we are talking of a death toll of 3 Israelis and 3 people wounded as well in the last hour. One of those wounded people is a young girl. And that, of course, is very sad news.
I think what is very important is to emphasize the critical importance of people being in shelters. I mean, if you stay in a direct hit, there's not very much that you can do, but if you're in a shelter, you are protected. We see here a bus hit, and people were probably around this bus, and they got hit, so they should have been in shelter. And I just want to raise this point. It is critically important that people follow the guidance of the authorities and stay in shelters.
And we're looking at images on our screen right now. We have Israeli media confirming that one person has been killed in that rocket fire in the city of Rishon LeZion. Also in the last hour, 3 people wounded in the city of Holon. A bus was hit in that city. We saw images just a short while ago of that scene where we could see what looked like a burnt out remain of that vehicle and emergency teams on the scene. So if you're just joining us now, this is breaking news. a barrage of rockets being fired from the Gaza Strip towards the city of Tel Aviv. Confirmation that 3 people were wounded in the city of Holon. A bus was hit. One of those people was a young girl, is a young girl. Again, those are 3 wounded people, and the Israeli media reporting that the one person who was seriously hurt in Rishon LeZion has passed away. Right now, we're going to turn to the city of Ashkelon in southern Israel. We cross to my colleague Kalev Ben David, who is at a hotel there in southern Israel. And what a traumatic and dramatic hour it has been. Kalev, what is going on right now in the city of Ashkelon? What are you seeing?
I have to explain, Benita, we are sitting in the Regina Hotel, which is on the coast of Ashkelon. We're about a dozen miles immediately north of the Gaza border. Right behind me, behind this window, we're actually facing south, right into the direction of Gaza, and we are so close we can actually see the rockets going up out of Gaza on the way to Tel Aviv. So we've been sitting here watching those rockets behind us, these trails of light going up and crossing, of course, over Ashkelon, and we have not even actually had we did have air raid sirens at the top of the hour. There were a few that we had, but since then, what we've been doing is seeing those trails of light coming above us, above Ashkelon, and heading onto Tel Aviv. We are also hearing booms. Most of them are probably of the Israeli airstrikes in the Gaza Strip. So we are seeing and hearing, but the irony is we're here in Ashkelon, which of course just until about 40 minutes ago really bore the brunt of the rocket attacks, and of course 2 people were killed here earlier today. We came down here to cover it, but now the war, the Hamas's war on Israel, has entered into the heart of Israel, into the Tel Aviv area, and of course that totally changes the picture.
That's an idea, because the sirens were sounding here in Tel Aviv, and obviously thousands of people had to race for shelter, including here at the channel. Talk to us about what happened where you were when you heard those sirens and you heard those explosions outside, the interceptions that were taking place overhead.
Right. So we are in as I said, we are in a hotel where we are in an exposed area. I'm sitting in front of a plate glass window with my guests. When those alarms go off, we did go down to the shelter. It's just the entrance to the shelter is just a few feet from us. But again, we have not actually heard any of the bombs hitting, because that has been in the Tel Aviv area. I want to just say we have with us Lieutenant Colonel in the IDF Reserves, Peter Lerner. He's the former head of the Foreign Press Branch of the IDF and director of the General International Relations Division of the Histadrut, and Michal Kotler-Wunsch, former Israeli Parliament member and former Knesset liaison on matters concerning the ICC. And Peter, just start with you. You were the IDF spokesman during Israel's last conflict with 2014. This is already certainly the biggest conflict with Hamas, with the militants in Gaza since then. But we're seeing things tonight that we didn't even see in 2014.
So I don't necessarily agree. I think what we have seen, these types of attacks in 2014, but the extent and the volume of the strikes going into Tel Aviv, the Tel Aviv area, is obviously much larger. You know, in the last 7 years, Hamas hasn't been sitting idly by. They've been working on building up their munitions, their operational capabilities, just the same as Israel is. And while at this hour, especially in the last 40 minutes, while we're all sitting here thinking of what's happening with our families back in the center of Israel, you know, the IDF and the Israeli Air Force are conducting their extensive strikes within Gaza, and this is the reason, you know, we're focused on what's going on in Israel. But we have to keep in mind that the IDF and the Israeli Air Force are conducting their strikes to degrade, damage, destroy Hamas and its infrastructure.
Right, and we should note that several top leaders, militant leaders of both Hamas and the Islamic Jihad have been reported killed, and this evening another report of even dozens of Hamas commandos, and I don't have that confirmed, were killed in one strike. Michal, the people who live down here in Ashkelon also often say, you know, things would be different if the war were conducted into, say, the Israeli heartland, the Tel Aviv area, and that's what we're seeing this evening.
Indeed, Kalev, and actually that is the reason that I came down down here tonight. I think that it's very important, and every Friday that we end up standing at the Black Arrow Memorial with the Golden Family is exactly to make that point. It is but an hour's drive away from the center of the country where all of our families are, and we are indeed worried about them. But there are people that have lived like this and are raising children in the same way that they grew up. So it is unacceptable, and there is no country in the world that would withstand the kind of attack from a genocidal terror organization that is calling the shots, as we see over the last 24 hours. It is unacceptable, and I would expect all trustees of international law, of the rules-based order, to stand up very clearly and hold to account what is a complete violation of international law, of the rules-based order that they are mandated to uphold, protect, and maintain.
Right. Now, Peter, as you said, there's strikes being conducted all during this. We're hearing some of them. We're hearing the jets right now flying overhead. But give us a sense of what the IDF is planning to do in light of what you could certainly call an escalation just in the past hour.
So I would say that the general program of the IDF would be to attack the command, control, communications and intelligence capabilities of Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad and other terrorist organizations in the Gaza Strip. That means that they have to utilize all of the tools that the Israeli Air Force and the intelligence capabilities in order to take out those unique tools that Hamas have developed over the years. You will see, what we have seen is precision guided missiles going through windows and leaving buildings standing, and you've seen buildings that have been brought to gravel. And I would say that those are the scope of the IDF's capabilities of knowing who's in what room and what room you need to touch on one hand. So very primary targets, people that are leading the activity but are in the midst of the civilian population, and therefore you need a precision strike. And on the other hand, taking out these command centers, whether they're in high-rise buildings like the Hanadi Tower, 15 stories high, and taking out the entire capabilities of command and control from Hamas's leadership. We can expect that to increase, and I definitely believe, in 2014, this was the ending tone of the conflict, the high-rise buildings. Now we're just at the beginning, 26, 27 hours into this conflict, and this has already happened an hour ago. And this is what we can expect this to escalate further in order to send a very clear message to Hamas and its leadership that there is a lot to pay if they continue this escalation.
Right, and there's been a very quick escalation. I want to go back to Benita Levine there in our Tel Aviv studio, because it's really in Tel Aviv, ironically not here in Ashkelon, which this evening is bearing the brunt of the massive rocket attack from the Gaza Strip into Israel. Benita, what's the situation there?
Well, Caleb, as you know, as we were broadcasting live here out of our studios in Jaffa and Tel Aviv, sirens sounded. We were in studio, and choosing to stay in studio, retired Brigadier General Michael Herzog, as well as Arsen Ostrovsky, thanking both of them for staying on with us. They have both now left the studio. Joining me right now is our senior correspondent, Owen Alterman. And Owen, when those sirens went off, people had to rush to shelter, including people here at the channel for the most part. Talk to us about what that felt like when people were told they had a very short while to get to safety as those sirens were heard overhead.
Yeah, listen, the sirens are faint in our building. I didn't hear them all that much. In fact, I almost had to check the television screens to see Tel Aviv, at least southern Tel Aviv and Jaffa on the screen for the first siren at 8:45 local time. Listen, we all just walked downstairs. It's as simple as that. Walked through the building, walked down the stairwell with a colleague, did it live on Instagram and live on Facebook. And then it was nice to be able to share that moment with people. It was nice to be able to walk people who aren't in Israel right now and want to connect with what's going on here, to walk them through and to visually show and narrate what was going on, to talk about it ourselves, to flip the camera, to show our colleagues walking down the stairwells. A number of times we came back. We came back because we had waited our 10 minutes or over, then we turned around again. I think it happened 3 times. We could hear the booms. At the beginning, we were counting the booms. 1, 2, 3, 4. We lost track. We think there were 20 or 30. I suspect that one of them was the hit on Cholon, which is, as you know, not far away from where we are. That was especially loud, but there are other loud ones where the interception in the sky might have been close to us. Not the first time I've walked to bomb shelters in Tel Aviv. I was here for the 2014 war. I lived in a building. I was the only one living there. In the middle of the night, I was sometimes being in the stairwell all by myself. I think it's important for viewers to understand the casualty totals in Israel are not going to be as high as they are in Gaza. It's the nature of the way these conflicts are, and Gazans don't have the protective spaces and the infrastructure and the governance and the government that cares for its people, at least in the large part that we in Israel have. But that doesn't mean it's not hard on people here. You know, I pretend to be young at least, and I'm healthy. If I need to walk a minute and a half to a stairwell, I do it. But there are people in wheelchairs. There are people in nursing homes. There are people in ICUs of hospitals who can't just get up and walk to a stairwell. And there was such a large barrage that it could, and in some cases apparently did, overwhelm the Iron Dome system. And it really could endanger people and put people through real trauma. And also, just in terms of stepping back to the analysis, obviously this is an inflection point in this conflict. It also may be a major event in the history of the State of Israel. Not just about May 2021 in this conflict, but the whole 100-year course of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Too soon to say that, but it's certainly a major milestone event, needless to say, in the immediate conflict, but even in the wider frame.
And certainly in the immediate context, Hamas claiming, the terror group, in the last hour or so, that it has sent 130 rockets from the Gaza Strip towards Tel Aviv. We're now going to go back to our Kalev Ben David in Ashkelon. And what is the latest there, Kalev? What are you hearing?
Right. Well, I've been joined, Benita, by our defense correspondent, Daniel Tzemach, who was up on the roof of this Regina Hotel during that whole massive barrage of rocket fire headed to the Tel Aviv area. Daniel, describe what you were seeing up there.
Right, Cleve. So I can tell you that we were really looking at the rockets as they were being launched. And after a few barrages, we started to understand that once we were starting to witness the rockets being launched from within the Gaza Strip, and we started seeing the rocket alert sirens elsewhere throughout the country, that these are indeed the rockets that are destined to land in central Israel, or at times also in the city of Ashdod, which is just around 20 minutes south of Tel Aviv. So you start to understand that what you're seeing in the sky is no longer those Iron Dome interceptor missiles, those Tamir missiles. You're actually also seeing rockets. And given the really the intensity of the latest barrages, and then seeing that compared to the visuals of the Tamir interceptor missiles in central Israel, in cities like Rishon LeZion, just outside Tel Aviv. By the way, we're talking about 3 rockets that have landed in that city. We start to understand the picture of how these events happen so quickly, a matter of seconds between something being thrown or launched from the Gaza Strip until it lands on a building in central Israel. So this is a serious threat. It's a serious concern. And a quick reminder is also the fact that there were elderly people here in Ashkelon who, one lost her life today, another critically injured, because those people are not going to be able to get to the bomb shelter if they're not already there. It's that simple. And so people that are in Tel Aviv, that are in Rishon LeZion, that are in Hulon, that are in Givatayim, all these places that have apparently potentially bore a brunt of the rocket fire, they need to already be in their bomb shelters. That's what the Homefront Command drove through the city today, telling people, get in your bomb shelters. And people here may feel lax, and they may feel as though this isn't going to hit them, because you know what, Sderot unfortunately maybe gets more rockets that strike homes than Ashkelon. But today is an example that you cannot predict what's going to happen, right, and you need to be safe.
Right, and we're seeing footage of smoke they're building out of buildings in the Tel Aviv area, and I believe that people in the Tel Aviv area maybe were a little lax, and we're hearing, of course, of a direct hit on a bus in the city of Holon, 3 people injured, and of course a fatality. We're getting reports of 1 fatality in Rishon LeZion, which would bring a total of 3 Israelis killed since the start of this latest upsurge of violence. Michal, Peter discussed the actual battlefield that the Israel Defense Forces is now engaged in planning. There's another battlefield that Israel engaged in, and that is the diplomatic battlefield, including the public diplomacy, getting Israel's message. Now, after what happened this evening, Israel is going to have to respond hard. It's likely there's going to be civilian casualties in Gaza. So how is Israel going to have to make its case sufficiently to the world that it needs to respond to these events this evening?
So, Kalev, that is actually one of the most important questions that we have to address, and we have to know that when you look at the media and the reporting up until now, including, and I read out to you just before, a UN condemnation of the State of Israel for what happened in the last 24 hours, without complete failure to mention the 400 rockets that are addressed to the State of Israel, it is imperative that democracies understand that this is about terror, and this is about terrorist organizations that are dictating a reality that, if they are enabled to dictate and if they are empowered to do so in the State of Israel, this is about all democracies having to combat terror and the regimes sponsoring them. And you know, we look at global events through a looking glass, but international law has been actually weaponized in a way, and its institutions have been weaponized in a way that all democracies must actually rise to the challenge and speak up against this kind of activity, terror activity, a genocidal organization. And we heard from Daniel the thousands of Israelis that actually would be dead if it wasn't for the Iron Dome intercepting. So we had 2 fatalities today in Ashkelon, and another report of another fatality, and many, many injured, tens. And of course, I haven't spoken about the emotional injury that's caused and the trauma that's caused to the citizens of the South and in general the citizens of the State of Israel. But on top of that, we have to understand that the investment that the State of Israel has made, prioritizing life and investing resources and directing resources to Iron Dome, should not confuse the democratic world to create some sort of a new concept of proportionality in international law as we know the concept, and count the numbers, because we may see more fatalities on the Gazan side, but those 2 million Gazans are held hostage by the very same terror organization that does not care about the human rights of Palestinians. It is hell-bent on destroying the State of Israel.
Right. I think we have to also remind the viewers an important point, that Ben Gurion International Airport outside of Tel Aviv did cease incoming and outgoing flights this evening in light of this rocket barrage. The only other time I can remember that was briefly during the 2014 Gaza operation. But Daniel, I understand we do have some confirmed updates on the injuries and casualties of this last barrage of rockets.
Right. So we're talking about a few different really crash sites, if you will, of these rockets in central Israel, in Holon, in Rishon LeZion, and in Givatayim. We understand that there is, again, as we mentioned, 1 more fatality from Rishon LeZion. We also know that there are 9 other injuries as a result of those different sites where the rockets landed. We don't know exactly the extent. We do know the injuries vary from light to more serious, and it's something that we can say is certainly caught some people by surprise, because we're talking about some people that were wandering in the streets and may not have been able to get into bomb shelters in time. I can also update regarding the latest in alleged Israeli military strikes in response. There's now reports that maybe the Israeli Navy has gotten involved in the sort of strikes, and it's important to acknowledge, and of course Peter would be able to speak on this more than I can, but the Israeli military has a very large bank of targets, and that bank of targets has different priority sort of sites that Israel can strike, and it does appear as though Israel is going higher up on those priority sites. We understand there is a report, again, of a tunnel that could have been struck, and just yesterday there was an announcement about a tunnel being struck. We still don't know what the damage that was suffered by Hamas as a result of that. There are reports that there were several militants inside that offensive terror tunnel, which still exists. In 2014, it was all the talk. Now it's in the background, but it's still there.
Right. I want to stress that, of course, injury and casualty figures out of the Gaza Strip come from Palestinian sources. We have no way to confirm them. There was one unconfirmed report. As many as 30 Hamas fighters were in that tunnel, but again, that is unconfirmed. I just note that when we were up on that hotel roof earlier this evening, when it was light out, we could see the Israeli naval boats there off the shore in Gaza. And Peter, as you've described very well the actions that Israel is going to be taking, but there are also some diplomatic efforts underway. We know of Egypt, reports maybe of Israel's new friends in the Gulf getting involved. Give us a sense of the calculation, both the military, but now also the political or, say, diplomatic calculations that the military, together with the government, have to take in deciding how far to take this.
Thanks. I think, first of all, we have another issue that we need to address is the lack of communication of the Israeli government to the Israeli public. We haven't had a press conference. We haven't had the government being held accountable to the Israeli public that are now being in shelters from Hadera down here to Ashkelon and further south. So I think before we talk about the external relations, we need to talk about the internal relations and what the Israeli public has to know. Where are we headed? What is going on? What is in it for us? What is the end game for the State of Israel with regard to our neighbors? This is the problem of the last 7 years. Since 2014, the defense establishment has constantly been talking about the that Hamas has no will, they are deterred, and there's no will for another bout. But here we are again, 7 years later, at ground zero, starting off again where we left before in 2014. So what are we going to do? You know, the idea or the hope that Gaza will be a demilitarized zone. There needs to be either diplomacy to achieve that or military action to achieve that. Now, I prefer diplomacy, but who are you going to talk to in Gaza, and what does that do to the Palestinian Authority? So you can't ignore the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank and hope Hamas will disappear. And this, unfortunately, has been the policy of the government. You know, I think we also need to be talking about you know, following the international media and the international arena, as I have throughout the day. I think we've been very slow in communicating what the situation is. I think I-24 is doing a fantastic job in conveying that, but unfortunately the rest of the international media, you know, they're focusing on Jerusalem, Sheikh Jarrah, which are important stories for the context. But Hamas's decision yesterday to put that ultimatum at 5 o'clock, that 6 p.m. last night, they intend on shooting, that should have been the focus of all of Israel's diplomacy, all of Israel's communication. They should have been here to show that to the world, because they decided the outcome of where we're going and what's going to happen to the poor people of Gaza. And you know, my heart, you see the pictures, and there will be children unfortunately killed in this exchange. And it is unfortunate every single time. But it's their leadership that pushed this button. You can't expect Israel to sit on its hands, hope that nothing will happen while they attack us. When they attack us, we will respond.
Right. I'm just going to reiterate that we have, again, confirmed 1 casualty, 1 Israeli killed by rocket fire in Rishon LeZion, and 11 injured. Michal, obviously, you were a member of the government until quite recently, until the last election, a member of one of the ruling parties, the Blue and White Party, of Defense Minister Benny Gantz. So certainly, I'm sure you have something to respond
100%,
to.
and I'll remind you that what actually brought me into Knesset is my involvement with a legal case and cause, the Golden Case and Cause that I mentioned before. Hadar Golden and Aron Shaul, 2 deceased soldiers that actually 1 hour after the international humanitarian ceasefire was brokered in 2014, Hadar Golden was killed and abducted into a terror tunnel. And since then, almost 7 years have passed, and as we know, Hamas is holding his remains actually in standing violation of international law. And what I wanted to say, and connect to what Peter has just said, actually the biggest challenge, I think, and I have confronted, including, you're right, in this last Knesset, my fellow parliamentarians, is that we are together with Hadar Golden, together with the 2 million citizens of Hamas, we are actually in captivity of a paradigm that we have held for far too long. And it is time to change and challenge the equation and flip it, because it is unacceptable that a terror organization, a genocidal terror organization, will decide the reality on the ground of a democratic country. It is unacceptable that a moral equation be placed on, you know, every international channel that I looked at today between Hamas, a murderous genocidal terror organization, and Israel, a law-abiding democracy. And therefore, it is time to flip the equation. And I think that Peter is 100% right. We have not engaged, and we have, when I say we, it is the Golden Case and Cause that has not been understood properly along the 7 years that we have created and gone to the international arena and other countries.
Okay,
with.
now air raid sirens. Now in Ashkelon, we're live in Ashkelon. Air raid sirens are coming. I'm going to ask the guests to start moving, please, to the air raid shelter. I also will be moving to the air raid shelter. There is now air raid siren going in Ashkelon. We are now going down live to the air raid shelter. We will continue as much as we can to have coverage as we go. Benito, we are now in the midst of an air raid siren here in Ashkelon.
And it's breaking news out of Ashkelon in southern Israel. You heard it while Kalev Ben David was speaking, siren sounding while he was in studio there at a hotel in the southern city of Ashkelon. That siren went off. They have just moments to get up and get to shelter, much as has happened in Tel Aviv in the last hour or so. With me in studio here, our senior correspondent, Owen Alterman. Owen, we had the sirens in Tel Aviv in the last hour. We also heard from the studio the explosions above, which our guests explained were actually the interceptions, right. The Iron Dome missile defense system. Talk to us about what is going on right now as those sirens go off in Ashkelon and what the defense world is going to be doing. In fact, we're going to go back to Ashkelon and hear right on the ground what is going on.
All right. Well, Benita, I'm here. We are now at the entrance here to the air raid shelter in the Regina Hotel. The stairway leads down to the shelter, which is actually also doubles as the hotel's synagogue. Almost all of our staff are now down past me. They're in it. And, of course, according to the sirens have now stopped here in Ashkelon. The Army's instructions are for people to either wait for some kind of all-clear signal or wait a minimum of 10 minutes. We have not actually heard, we did not hear the Iron Dome system going off. As I said, there's an Iron Dome battery actually quite close to this hotel, and we have been hearing their launches. We have not actually heard any of the explosions. I don't know if the fired in another direction. I asked my defense correspondent, Daniel, and give us know about this latest barrage of rockets.
Right. So we can say that there were indeed several, not only here in the surrounding area, the Israel-Gaza border as well. We can also say that after just peeking outside slightly, seeing as Ashkelon shares that coastline with the northern part of the Gaza Strip, what appear to be Israeli airstrikes, the sky illuminating with what generally is identifiable as Israeli airstrikes.
All right, Benita, that is the situation now here in Ashkelon.
That's our Kalev Ben David and defense correspondent Daniel Tzemach live from a shelter in Ashkelon. Of course, we were on air when those sirens went off, and they have had to go with their guests to shelter and to safety, as do thousands of people in the city of Ashkelon. With me right now in studio, our senior correspondent Owen Alterman, and in news just in, Owen, we're hearing that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and alternate Prime Minister and Defense Minister Benny Gantz are going to address the nation in a few minutes' time. Of course, when that happens, we will bring it to you live. Right now, a very difficult night ahead for Israel. They will need to respond. What is the likely message that is going to come out of these two leaders in a short while?
Yeah, that is exactly the dramatic question, Vina. We heard one of our guests a short time ago, before the sirens at Ashkelon, talk about the need for a press conference and the need for the leaders to speak to the country. It seems as if Prime Minister Netanyahu and Defense Minister Gantz were listening. And yeah, 10:15 local time, just a few minutes from now, they're going to be speaking. What are they going to say? First of all, the fact that it's been commented on. The fact that they're up there together. These are two political rivals, obviously, as we've seen bitter rivals over the course of the past 2 years. The fact that they're going to be appearing together, obviously, itself sends a message of unity, a message that we certainly would want to hear at a moment like this. I suspect it's going to be a message of reassurance. I suspect it's going to be a message of perseverance. I suspect it's going to be another message to the country that these will not be the last moments in which we're taking shelter, that there's a long road ahead. But what exactly that long road is, what exactly the military's plans are, obviously they're not going to tell us the details. They'll give us a sketch and an outline. We're obviously already seeing it with those attacks on those high-rise buildings in Gaza. Obviously, none of us is expecting a quiet night.
We certainly will be following all those developments, and of course we'll be bringing those announcements from Benjamin Netanyahu and Benny Gantz to you live as soon as that does happen. Right now, let's go back to Ashkelon. Our Kalev Ben David is at a hotel in a shelter. Kalev, what is going on right now?
Well, we are now out of the shelter. The sirens have stopped here in Ashkelon. I'm still with me, former IDF spokesman Peter Lerner, who just a few minutes ago said that what needs to happen is the government, the leaders have to speak to the people of Israel. And we now have word Prime Minister Netanyahu and Defense Minister Benny Gantz will make an address shortly. Peter, what do you think they should be saying?
So our experience suggests that while we would want to hear where this is going, they'll actually say we're going to beat Hamas. So we will be left in limbo, and again probably with more questions after their press conference than before. There'll be very strong statements. They'll make a point of saying Hamas is to blame, that law is on our side, which is obviously correct, but they won't give any substantial promises. They won't say how long to expect this to go on. They'll probably say something along the lines that it'll go on as long as it needs to go long, and be very non-committing with regard to the outcome or the end game of what we expect from this round of violence.
Right. Michal, I want you to weigh in, of course, as a former member of this government. What would you expect Prime Minister Netanyahu and your former party leader, Defense Minister Benny Gantz, to be saying?
I'll tell you what I wouldn't like to hear. What I wouldn't like to hear is the use of the word return to routine or quiet, because I think that people who live here in this area, people who live in Sderot, the people that we stand with in the Black Arrow Memorial every single Friday with the Golden Family, to say the following: if we do not change the paradigm, if we do not flip the equation and make the holding of 2 deceased soldiers, Hadar Goldin and Aron Shaul, 2 civilians, Avera Mengistu and Hisham Asayed, for nearly 7 years in standing violation of international law, if we don't flip that equation and turn that from an asset into a liability on Hamas, a genocidal terror organization, then there can be no quiet. Then we cannot renew the covenant in Israeli society of the mutual guarantee upon which this country was founded and upon which it exists. It is imperative that, and I agree with Peter, that there be more content for the civilians of the State of Israel, and it will be insufficient to say we are going to return to quiet, because, as Jabotinsky said, quiet can also just be refish, is the word in Hebrew, sheket hu refish. If it is not for an ultimate goal of changing reality, then quiet is insufficient.
Okay, well, one thing that we don't have here, sitting at this table